Arsenal against Chelsea. It's the derby. It's the pretenders derby. It's the fake title contenders against the faker title contenders. But to be fair, you never said Chelsea were in the title race. No. You said all season Arsenal were in the title race. You faltered, they faltered, and you're both in a very similar situation now.
Well, mathematically, we're still in the title race. Factually, I remain correct. But yeah, look, it's been obviously a disappointing season for Arsenal from a Premier League perspective. No question about that. I think there's a number of reasons as to why they find themselves in the position they do. I'm not going to absolve the club or Mikel Arteta from all responsibility. I think Mikel's made some mistakes in some of the approaches and some of the decisions he's made. I think the club made mistakes not doing business last summer that needed to be done, and then having a chance to maybe rectify some of that in January, not doing it. They took a risk and they've ended up with it blowing up in their faces. That's the reality of the situation. But a game against Chelsea, it's always one that you want to win. You know, it's a rivalry that, I've got to be honest, growing up wasn't really that big of a deal for me. But as the money started to come in, and Arsenal under Arsene Wenger were kind of the good versus the evil, if you like, of Roman Abramovich, who's picked up this club that should be playing in the division below and got them up to sort of Premier League title contender status. So yeah, look, it's a game that means quite a bit to the fans, and I think it's going to be an interesting one because despite what we say about the shortcomings of the two squads, there's a lot of talent on both sides.
I think I was just literally looking at Arsenal's last 3 games. You've only scored one goal in the league, and that was against Manchester United in the game you probably should have lost, and it was a Declan Rice screamer. What's happened to Chelsea? Let's go there first, because apparently you should have been in the Championship.
Yeah, I'm going to get you back for that one. Chelsea they've returned to the mean, right? Chelsea are 4th in the Premier League right now. I think they should finish in the top 4. I've said that, I've been pretty vocal on what the remit should be for Enzo Maresca. And just tailed off. That's coincided with the drop in form of Cole Palmer. Things just aren't going his way at the moment. Obviously missed his first penalty ever on the weekend against Leicester. Chelsea still managed to get the result. But it's just a case of inconsistency, and you're going to have that with a young squad. Chelsea, a lot's been made about how expensive the squad is, but I don't think enough people are talking about how young the squad is. And the squad is the youngest in the Premier League by a couple of years. And I'm not gonna channel my inner Alan Hansen, but you never win anything with quids. And I think that's come to the fore. Obviously, there's key positional areas that Chelsea have struggled with, goalkeeper being the main one. Think about that dominant centre-back that Chelsea are missing. And going forward, a person to put the ball in the back of the net on a consistent basis when Nicholas Jackson is out. And so the spine needs to be improved in the summer. But in terms of where Chelsea are right now, I think we have, after the wins against Southampton and Leicester, those are wins that you should get. They're the 2 worst teams in the Premier League, historically 2 of the worst teams we've ever seen in the Premier League. I think Chelsea are kind of finding their form and finding their confidence again. Going to the Emirates is not a happy hunting ground for Chelsea in recent years. Growing up, it shows our age. Growing up, I remember Chelsea against Arsenal being cash money for Chelsea. Didier Drogba used to love it against Arsenal. They went through a long period where they couldn't touch us, couldn't beat us, where we were winning multiple titles. Obviously, that's changed over the last 4 or 5 seasons. And last season at the Emirates, it was one of the worst Chelsea performances I have ever seen. Arsenal completely dominated us. That midfield of Partey and Rice and Odegaard, they were purring. They were absolutely incredible. And I feel like Arsenal maybe taking a little step back from last season, but they still go into this game as overwhelming favourites, despite the fact that the whole front line is injured. I just think they're a better footballing team. We've seen in the Champions League this year that when Arsenal are confronted with a big game, they can rise to the occasion. I expect them to do that again on the weekend. But for Chelsea, if we can go to the Emirates and get a positive result, then I think that catapults us for the rest of the season in terms of finishing positively and hopefully finishing in the top 4 or 5.
I think there's a conversation we had about a certain Chelsea player that I was waiting for you to mention. I'm getting there. I was sort of hoping you mentioned him. No one did, and it seems like no one does. Cole Palmer, no goals in his last 9, but performance-wise is what I want to look at. Like, he's not impacting games at all. Earlier in the season, you would have worried about coming up against Palmer, but now I look at that front potential for Palmer, Neto, Sancho, and Kunku. Arsenal's defence should have a field day.
Yeah, they should in theory, but that's not a slight on Cole Palmer. It's more of how much faith I have in this Arsenal defence. And you got Ben White back in the picture now as well, which I think makes a big difference. He's been a huge miss for Arsenal this season. Not just what he gives you defensively, but offensively as well. And I don't think that's always been spoken about enough. On Cole Palmer, though, he's a young player still. People forget that. And young players go through patches where they're struggling. And often that's not because, you know, they're not good anymore or their talent's just disappeared. Sometimes it's because They need to slightly adjust something and tweak it. And when you don't have that experience, you don't always know where to turn. And this is where the coach comes in. You know, you've seen players before that like to operate in certain areas, get found out. Arsenal know where Cole Palmer wants to pop up. They're going to make sure they block those areas. They're going to make sure that he's well marshalled. That's where Enzo Maresca has to help him out and say, right, I'm going to adjust this and I'm going to adjust that so that you can pop up on the other side, or if not in a half space, in a wider area, so we can get you on the ball, so we can start playing through you again, so that confidence can come back. So I think it's about just making a slight tweak with Cole Palmer. I've seen this story with Martin Odegaard maybe 3 or 4 times since he's been at Arsenal, where he's really, really super effective. All of a sudden, teams figure out what he's trying to do, and then we have to make an adjustment or a tweak to get him back in the game, whether that be him dropping a little bit deeper or going further out to the right-hand side and getting closer to the winger. So I think that's where we're at with Cole Palmer right now.
I think he's a victim of his own success.
That as well, yeah.
First season, 22 league goals. I don't think anybody expected that. Chelsea fans certainly didn't expect that. We didn't even expect him to start for Chelsea. Didn't make his first start for Chelsea last year until the beginning of October, and ended up scoring that many league goals. And so he showed last year that he was one of the best players in the league. Of course, had a good summer, scored a great goal in the final of the Euros, and started the season on fire. He still scored 14 league goals. Say he doesn't score any more league goals between now and the end of the season. In his first 2 years at Chelsea, he would have scored 36 league goals, averaging what? That's, my maths is terrible, 18 goals a season. That's a great return for a player who's not a striker. And so Cole Palmer will find his form again. He's too good not to. Eye test wise, when you see him on the ball, you still see he's clearly one of the best players, if not the best player in our football team. Things run through him, and when he's not on fire, Chelsea do seem to struggle. But I think he'll find his form again. The only issue that I have is after the Southampton game, he put that post out on social media, and so obviously things are affecting him mentally. Harry was right to point out he's a young player. This is only his second season starting games in the Premier League, and when you look at the numbers that he is hitting, I think it's Bukayo Saka's best ever goal scoring season. I know that that's not his primary function. I think he scored 15 league goals. Cole Palmer in a poor season scored 14 league goals already. And so that shows you the levels.
The psychological side of it is interesting, because when he posted that, I think he also missed a penalty against Leicester, no? Yeah, he missed
against Leicester.
Obviously, his whole narrative is that he doesn't care, and like maybe he cares, but he doesn't show it very often.
Cold Palmer.
Yeah, and he's just not very cold at the moment. And I think now we're maybe seeing his age, seeing maybe he needs a bit more maturity. Just very quickly, I've just read the stat below me, by the way, speaking of age. Ethan Nwaneri, his last appearance before he turns 18. No player under the age of 18 has ever scored in a Premier League London derby. He's slowed down a little bit as well, as you sort of kind of expected.
I wouldn't say he's slowed down generally. I thought he was poor at Old Trafford last weekend. Yeah. But I think, again, when talking about young players, you can allow him that. He's 17 years old. So for that reason, I always made a point over the course of the last week of not really focusing on him when I was sort of picking apart Arsenal's performance up at United. I think he will come good again. The talent is there for everybody to see. I actually quite like him playing from the right-hand side, even though you'd argue that's not necessarily his natural position. I expect him to recover, and I expect him to be, if he does get the start, which, you know, with Martinelli and sort of Trossard now playing in those wide positions, because obviously Martinelli's back, and Mikel Merino doing quite well up front. It's not a given that he starts. Yeah. I would start him because I think this is exactly the type of game he could thrive in.
All right, score predictions. Quick stat for you. Arsenal are unbeaten in their last 6 Premier League games against Chelsea. 1-4 drawn 2, their longest run without a league defeat against them since a run of 19 between 1999, 2005.
When they should have been playing in the Championship.
Yeah, when they should have been playing in the Championship. When Zola should have been playing in the Championship, apparently.
Yeah. So Arsenal haven't kept a clean sheet at home in their last 4 games. Chelsea are winless away from home in their last 6 games. If I was a betting man, I'd go for an Arsenal win and both teams to score. So I'm going 3-1 Arsenal.
Arsenal to score 3 goals.
I can't see it. It feels like it works for Arsenal in the Champions League at the minute, because they seem to come up against sides that are willing to come at them. I don't really know what Chelsea will do. If Chelsea come out and play, then I think Arsenal could score goals. But if Chelsea just sit off ever so slightly, and I'm not saying full low block, but just a little bit deeper, that could be a problem. I'm actually going to predict a 1-1 draw, because how motivated are Arsenal right now in the league? It's horrible to say, because I expect them to secure second place and make sure that they don't fall any further than that. But it's natural, isn't it, to look at the title race and go, we've fallen off here, and maybe just pull it back a bit.
I was thinking 1-1. I think I don't think it's going to be a good game, which is quite sad. It's Arsenal-Chelsea, game week 30, I want to say, or 29. You want this to be one where you go, oh, it's going to be a cracking game. Chelsea fighting for top 4, Arsenal fighting for the title. Chelsea are fighting for top 4, but like very very languid recently. And Arsenal are not really fighting for the title. So I think 1-1, drab game. And you probably don't need to save the 2 or 3 hours of your weekend to go out and do something else. Watch Liverpool instead on Sunday.